Perry Bellgarde has reclaimed his seat as National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations. As David Zura reports, some are calling it a controversial win.
The polls are closed here in downtown Vancouver, and the Assembly of First Nations has elected incumbent Perry Bellgarde of Saskatchewan to a second term representing Indigenous communities at the national level. He won 328 of the 522 votes in a second ballot, giving him just over the 60% needed to be elected as a leader for a second term.
How do we now, as Indigenous peoples, First Nations peoples, move beyond these two things that have created havoc in our lives? How do we move beyond the genocide of that residential school system now? How do we move beyond that? And how do we move beyond the colonization of that Indian Act and exert ourselves as nations?
But there is some controversy.
You know, you heard what I had to say yesterday. I'm not going to go through all that again.
4 candidates in the race are claiming election interference. They say the presence of a federal minister ahead of the vote was a disgusting display of interference. Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations Carolyn Bennett was at the annual General Assembly in Vancouver where the voting took place.
I understand the issues in regards to, some of the issues that they're talking about, but, they needed to be more gracious and more accepting of the results and saying, how can we work better together?
Also a significant takeaway here of the 5 candidates on the ballot today, there were 2 women, both from Manitoba. If one of them was elected, she would have been the first national chief of the AFN, and although that isn't what happened today, there is a sense that that time is getting closer.
Because we're starting to see more women chiefs in the First Nations, more Grand Chiefs in the First Nations and regional chiefs. So we're starting to see a momentum of females into the political leadership in the First Nations.
Bellegarde was first elected in 2014 and is now expected to start working on lobbying the federal government on an Indigenous rights recognition framework as a national federal election starts creeping closer. In Vancouver, David Zura, City News.